if it's just that reproductive part of my life, my hormones, my anatomy, my diet, that's it. And all of a sudden you drop the baby blinders and you see the whole picture. And it's like, oh, I have all these other ways to still work on my fertility, but it's so much bigger and it's so much more sustainable, more appealing. It improves quality of life immediately in real time. Like, why wouldn't we choose that? Of course we would choose that.
Welcome to the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that births us and transforms us. This is a space where women reclaim birth on their own terms, where deep ancient knowing meets primal courage. We talk birth, womanhood, breastfeeding, parenting, and the quiet power of choosing differently. Choosing of our own. Come as you are, leave more rooted. I'm Divya Kapoor, a childbirth educator, lactation counselor, trainee traditional midwife, and doula, disintegrating the politics of birth, one story at a time. There was a news article recently that said, India's fertility rate is down. First dip in 2 years. Generally, we are all observing a rise in the need for support in fertility as well. More and more clinics, IVF clinics and centers are coming along. Often, when we think of supporting our conception or having a baby, we think the medical route, tests, pills, and hormonal therapies. What if there was an alternative pathway, efficient and workable for couples, an area they could explore? That's the focus of today's podcast. I sit down with Nicole Lange, founder LifeHealingLife, a fertility expert in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, acupuncturist and educator specializing exclusively in trauma-informed care, pregnancy and post-infertility care in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have a fabulous conversation today, peeling off the general understanding of fertility and TCM. Nicole is passionate about her work and it comes through the conversation. Her work focuses on deep listening and personalized care, nuanced science-backed education, trauma-informed practices that enhance nervous system regulation, TCM techniques applied with modern understanding, true integration of body, mind, spirit, and life circumstances. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity and say we appreciate her offer of a 10% off for our listeners on her programs and some free education resources, the link to which is in the show notes. Let's begin. Hi, Nicole. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Divya. I'm so honored to be here.
Thank you. We've been talking, I think we spoke really long back and we spoke about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little funny story to it that we really thought that the recording was done in.
I just, in my mind, that lived as a podcast.
Yeah. And with you, Nicole, of everything we've spoken, you really have individualized care at the center of your work in traditional Chinese medicine.
Yes.
And that's slow, that's holistic. And often when parents go for preconception to the allopathic system, the holistic approach is usually kept behind, and there are a lot of tests, there are a lot of other things that happen. So where do you think we should really begin with? Shouldn't holistic individual approach be the first go-to everywhere, really? Traditional Chinese medicine is.
I would love that. I think that would be brilliant. And I think we're slowly making a shift towards that being accepted because it is increasingly evidence-based and supported by outcomes. And so I like to start with a little bit of history because I know in India, Ayurveda has a similar path to Chinese medicine, which is what I'm trained in. But I didn't know this until I heard a allopathic physician he's fighting in the US to get mental health put into training for physicians and nurses and allopathic providers. And he just casually mentioned on a podcast that I was listening to that in the mid 1500s, when what we know of as mainstream kind of modern medicine started, they separated the mind and the body. And so science got the body and the religion got the mind, so much so that they would disconnect the head from the body of a cadaver and give it to the church. And I had never heard that before. And of course, I was fascinated because it just was like, oh my gosh, that explains so much. And so I did a deep dive. I bought his book, and it really made me appreciate traditional cultures in a very kind of modern now way, because what it made me realize when I stopped and thought about it was that things like Ayurveda and holistic, slow, yin kind of medicine never separated the mind and the body. We've been, from the 1500s to now, just keep on going with that's connected. That, of course, that goes together. Of course, they relate and affect one another. And then the same thing for every other system, that while mainstream medicine was looking smaller and smaller and figuring out really amazing, helpful things that save many lives, they totally disconnected the pieces to get there, to things like vaccines and antidotes and EpiPens and things that are amazing, antibiotics. And so we are in this unique position as holistic-minded practitioners to bring back in this medicine that has just steadily stayed connected and multi-systemic. And if we get to this moment of what we know and what we all want, it really is the most now form of medicine that exists, to put them together.
Yeah, and wouldn't any system that separates mind and body will always be deficient in some way or the other?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how does traditional Chinese medicine then look at fertility from the lens of holistic care?
Yeah. So when I talk about fertility, I like to use analogies because I think they transcend experiences and cultures. So the way that I've come to understand in my brain, my differential diagnosis in Chinese medicine is kind of like, I like to think about the body as a bank account, because everyone can relate to finances. And reproductive function is not essential, right? Like some people will do it easier than others, but it's not considered a day-to-day essential function. So for this analogy, I say it's kind of like your body's going on vacation, and it's not fair. Some people are like backpack road trippers, and they can just, the bank account isn't particularly high, but they'll still have pregnancies and babies. And then other people's bodies are more sensitive to wanting even more in their account and adjusting to time changes and eating at nice restaurants. And we don't get to pick what kind of body we have, but we can say that if getting pregnant is like going on vacation to your body, it's something that you need enough abundance, enough safety, enough resources to do, then we can look at the factors of, okay, it might not seem fair, but if you haven't been able to do that yet, how do we start to conserve what you have? How do we start to supplement what you have? How do we start to get what you have in circulation so it's available? And these things will translate to things like respiration and digestion and diet. That's your income and your constitution and your family history and your early developmental stuff. That's like your starting balance that you opened up your account with. And spending and savings habits is lifestyle and activity versus downtime and rest and work. And then is it in circulation is a little bit of fight or flight and threat mode. So when we're threatened either through acute trauma or grief or very real reasons, or through constitutional imbalances that make us perceive the world in different ways, that can make our bank account feel threatened and like it's not a good idea to go on vacation because we need to keep everything really tight. So that's like, I say that's like investing in a bad investment where you might have the money, but it's stuck somewhere else.
That brings me to the aspect of mind when it comes to fertility. And so beautifully, when you were speaking about the bank account and the sense of safety to be able to use the resources, does it also happen that sometimes when we do not want to conceive, inherently there's something stopping us spiritually, emotionally, even if we have all the resources, all the money in the bank account, we may not be able to access the very resources?
Absolutely. I think that's, and sometimes it's for things that we see and we can say, oh, I think it's because I just started working with somebody who had a prior loss, and she really blamed herself for that and thought that it was, she was being punished because she was quite young when she was pregnant the first time. And then she waited to meet a partner and is married and now having trouble. So sometimes it's working through things like that, but sometimes it's subtle learned behavior. It's just, I'm an oldest child with a parent with mental health stuff. So I've had to sort of like look out and raise myself. And so it just feels totally natural to be on high alert and do everything myself. But the body might not want to get pregnant from that place. It might want a community. It might want more buffers and more felt safety. So that is for sure an element that I want to work with. And sometimes fertility struggles themselves, there can be anatomical things, say blocked fallopian tubes. That's a blockage that is not at all emotional. But if you spend 3, 6, 9, 12 months trying to conceive before you find out that that's what's going on from a microscope slide kind of perspective, you spent all this time cultivating a narrative of something's broken, this can't work, I'm trying to rally positivity and hope, and then I get crashed down into grief and despair. And so even when you get to these places where, okay, we can do these treatments to bypass the fallopian tubes, or we can offer these treatments, there can still be a significant blockage emotionally to just being able to feel like you can let your guard down or think that that's possible. And the good news is you don't have to be perfect in this regard either. Like there's lots of guarded people. There's lots of people that expect the worst that still have many, many babies. But I think, isn't it nice as a provider to cultivate more trust, more acceptance, more abundance than feed into that threat and something's wrong narrative?
Yeah, and that again takes me to menarche and takes me to sensuality. And the way we've been raised, especially for myself, in a very conservative society. And I think when I do see cultures across the world, it's pretty much for women, it's pretty similar. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we grew up with the sense of sensuality as something bad, not really. We don't explore ourselves, we don't know about our bodies, or we don't look at them from the lens of safety, or there's so many things we download from the news, from other things, from family, from our experiences. Does that as well down the line somewhere sometimes affect our...
I don't see how it couldn't, and it's subtle, and I say all the time, small and cumulative. Of course, there's instances where there's something large and treatable, and those are kind of the best fit for Western medicine. But so much is subtle and subclinical and nebulous and multi-systemic. And so, all the ripples that can shift us towards depleting and getting our bank account stuck in bad investments, we can counter. We don't have to just magically wave a wand and undo it, but we can start to make choices. We can start to reframe our thoughts and challenge those narratives and really come to a place where we feel powerful and we see the beauty and we see the wisdom and I was just listening to your episode with Critty, and she just dropped so many beautiful ways of, I think she was saying, she was being operated on by the culture and by the medicine before there was anything physically done to her body, and just the coming back to we don't have to take that on. We don't have to believe, we don't have to buy into that. And it's so powerful. And I think there is this motivation when it comes to conception where we might just be on autopilot, or we might be willing to accept it because it's so ubiquitous. And then all of a sudden we get to this place in our lives and we have this opportunity to really pause and challenge and question and rethink it. And we can be reborn ourselves as we birth these babies from this place.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in Ayurveda, when it comes to healing, it's not necessarily attached to our sensuality. It's not necessarily attached to how we function with our hidden trauma. And trauma-informed care is also something which is your forte. But when it comes to Ayurveda, we do talk about a lot of pranic healing and sitting in meditation and doing the prana work, which is really using the breath to go through all the chakras, and that's very similar to the energy meridians that I read about in traditional Chinese medicine. What is that, and how does it connect eventually to the diagnosis when you're doing a diagnosis for fertility, preconception?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally enmeshed. It's not even enmeshed. It's all one, I think, right? Like the breath work, the being present, the chi, the energy, it's all just a part of our moment-to-moment conditions. And those moment-to-moment conditions are more or less fertile, more or less safe, more or less. And so when we practice things like awareness of our chakras or our breathing or cultivating emotional expression in authentic, healthy ways that align with our reality, all of these things just start to shift. And so, yeah, it's not even to me, how do they influence? It's like they are the fertility, they are the pregnancy, they are the birth, they are our lactation.
Yeah, so does it also mean then that if you have a problem, so often the allopathic system will look at just the reproductive system. So they're either looking anatomically there, or they are checking, doing a lot of tests for different phases of the reproductive cycle. Do you think they somewhere do not draw the connection to other parts of the body? For example, a reproductive system, like a part of the body might be connected to heart or kidney, or like through
Yes.
yeah.
My answer is yes, exclamation point. They do. And that's back to like whether it's the actual like literal parts, like we were talking about with cadavers and measurements and science. They're very good at, we're going to look in your blood and find these hormone levels, right? And they're not good at, what are your relationships? What is your purpose? What is your passion? What is your community? And these are things that are heart and kidney energy in Chinese medicine. And I know Ayurveda has its equivalents. And these things absolutely matter. And we do see, I mean, I'm a very sciencey acupuncturist because I wanted to study genetics before my own trauma and my own fertility journey. And so there's so much that just connects these things. And again, I feel like it's a real mic drop kind of statement, but this sort of medicine and this sort of approach is the most modern based on the research. Like, you cannot take away the heart energy and treat fertility efficiently. You may succeed at treating it, but you're creating an uphill battle unnecessarily, and you're slowing yourself down unnecessarily. And when you start to see them together, everything gets easier and more effective. So I say one is like bare minimum scenario, and we get to this place where we would happily accept bare minimum, where it's like, yes, my relationship, my quality of life, my purpose, my identity, my physical body, my mental health have all been harmed. But if you give me a baby at the end of it, I can just work on all those things afterwards, right? And like that on some level is a success. And I don't want to take away from anyone who's walked that path and had that sort of outcome, because it is miraculous still. But if we stop and we see that there's an alternative path that doesn't do those things, and not only can give you the same outcome of success with your fertility and a baby, but can protect and enhance and serve all these layers along the way, and then somebody hands you your baby, or you scoop up your baby and bring it to your chest, like that is just whole and beautiful compared to a bare minimum, and then try to fix what is all broken and messed up afterwards. And again, they're both miraculous. I never want anyone to feel bad about their story, but I don't think we do a good job as a culture of knowing that there is that alternative. At least in the US, it's really like that is not at all. It's a fringy woo-woo thing versus like, no, this is actually good medicine.
Yeah, and that's happening here as well. I mean, when it comes to infertility, and we'll come to that. I mean, one of the questions I had for you was also, do you think we should call it infertility? But yeah, and it's
that's
also
a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also happening. Yeah. Before we go there, I wanted to say and
Yeah.
add to what you were saying that here in India as well, IVF is doing the rounds, and everybody just goes to IVF as one of the ways they would like to have a baby. And sort of when you were speaking all of this, it made me feel that there is a system out there as strong as traditional Chinese medicine and a holistic approach where you enter pregnancy from a state of independence, empowered self, than dependent on a system further down the line. That
Yes.
it's a vicious cycle. It can still like make and break you along the way.
Yeah. And you can't challenge what you don't see. So I think conversations and podcasts like yours and women telling their stories, and it just all of a sudden when it comes into your awareness, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I say the one way is like the baby blinders, it's like a horse wearing blinders. It's like if it's just that reproductive part of my life, my hormones, my anatomy, my diet, that's it. And all of a sudden you drop the baby blinders and you see the whole picture. And it's like, oh, I have all these other ways to still work on my fertility, but it's so much bigger and it's so much more sustainable, more appealing. It improves quality of life immediately in real time. Like why wouldn't we choose that? Of course we would choose that. And you may still need IVF. So I think this goes to your question, should we call it infertility or is it cultivating fertility? And I think it's both. I think I kind of divide up my work into quarters. So this is another analogy. So the quarter that is infertility, like do you have an anatomical situation where there's some growth in your uterus acting to, dysregulate implantation, or do you have an overt microscope slide hormone imbalance that could be corrected with outside hormones or things like that? That is treating infertility. So that is pathology, that is medicine, and that reflects the reality that for many people, this is a biological issue. And so I want people to put 25% of their energy and their chi and their attention to making sure that they cross their T's and dot their I's and can make sure they rule out those things, or they know how to interpret. A lot of times, if you know how to listen to your cycle and your body, you can make really informed guesses that, if your luteal phase is less than 10 days from when you ovulate to when you get your period, there's a very good chance that your progesterone isn't supporting that part of your cycle very well, right? You don't need a test. Like you may get a bunch of tests that tell you all sorts of different things. Actually, your cycle is the best indicator of your progesterone levels. And likewise, if you have, giant clots or filmy discharge of tissue coming out with your menstrual period, there's inflammation and or blockages in your uterus almost always. And so we don't want to miss these things, and we can treat them, and Western medicine can be very effective at that. So that's my 25%, and that I would call infertility. And then there's 75% more. 1/4 is foundation, which is your body has to feel safe and resourced enough. So that has to be like the root of everything that's built on. You're not going to, I call the 25% that is troubleshooting the infertility your nursery. You want to make your nursery nice. You want to make sure there's nothing going on in your nursery, but it has to be in a house with a good foundation. And then the rest of your mind and your body, so your heart and your kidneys and your chakras and your respiratory function, those are all like the rest of your house. And so if your kitchen isn't functioning and no one's sleeping in the bedroom and a family of critters is moving into your attic of anxiety and all of this, and your nursery is like, my nursery is perfect, my doctor's fixing my nursery, I have the best workers on my nursery, that just doesn't show up as well. And then the final quarter is your neighborhood, your community, your relationships. And again, if you look at that sort of baby blinders, it's nursery, nursery, nursery. I'm going to fight with my neighbors. I'm not talking to that one. This one's having another baby. I want to cry every time I see her. The squirrels are in the attic. I want to Google everything. I don't feel safe really in my nervous system at all because my whole trajectory of my life, my whole identity is in limbo. I can't control this. That feels very threatening. And all of a sudden it's like IVF, perfect embryo, perfect lining, but we're just missing so much.
Yeah, love these analogies. They kind of make it so relatable and you can see yourself through it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, thank you.
And while I was saying all these things, PCOS and PCOD came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge diagnosis being made here. And this conversation came from my client, who is a prenatal yoga instructor. So one of these days, she just sent me a message, Divya. Every second mother that's coming to me for preconception classes, yoga classes, has been diagnosed with PCOS, PCOD. And I don't know if it's really a label like that, or is it simply hormonal fluctuations?
Yeah, so polycystic ovarian syndrome or disorder, disease is truly a syndrome. So there's 3 signs of it. So when you look at the ovaries on an ultrasound, they have lots and lots of cyst-like follicles, but they're not actually cysts. They're lots and lots and lots of pods with primordial eggs in them. So they look like chocolate chip cookies on a scan. So lots and lots and lots on deck, lots and lots of antral follicles, they're called. So that's one potential marker. Another one is elevated androgen male hormones, so testosterone and other male hormones will be elevated, and that can cause signs like body hair, hair loss on the head, acne, male pattern baldness, sort of male symptoms. And then the third is irregular or missing ovulation, because it turns out all those little lots and lots of follicles on the ovaries overall will convert it. A little bit of hormone adds up, a little bit. Plus there's another hormonal imbalance that goes together with all these pods, that is a sort of insulin resistance, and the brain gets confused, the hypothalamus gets confused as to where it is in the cycle, because all those little follicles throwing off tiny bits of hormones add up, plus the insulin metabolic hormone imbalance. It changes the way that the hypothalamus is signaling to the pituitary gland to either grow or release an egg. It's confused because the hormones are off. So those are the 3 things: lots of follicles on an ultrasound, male hormones being elevated, and anovulatory, missing ovulation or irregular ovulation. You have to have 2 out of the 3 of those to have polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I don't have the elevated male hormones, but I have the other 2. And they can be different treatments based on which ones you have, right? But for me, like when I went off of birth control pills because I went on for bad periods, because I also have endometriosis, I didn't get my period back for 2 years because I have PCOS. And so they did a scan, and I had just tons and tons and tons of follicles. My body was super confused. It didn't start cycling again. And so I worked holistically on getting my period back. And I remember at one point, a doctor was like, well, do you want kids? And I'm like, someday. And she's like, well, I can just write you out a prescription for Clomid. And I was like, no, I'm working on it. I'm making progress. Like, that feels like a real jump. And by the time my husband and I were like, well, we shouldn't wait too long, and this might take a while because I have these weird cycles. I was having a period, and I use the word period very loosely. I was having like 1 day of spotting every 35-ish days. So still skewing very polycystic. I got pregnant the first time that we didn't prevent. So I think, do people have polycystic ovarian syndrome? If you know the diagnosis and you meet the definition, you do. Is that the same as saying you have infertility? Not necessarily. You might want to be aware of where subfertility might come from and some of the issues and some of the hormonal imbalances that you can work on, but you don't have to be perfect. I got pregnant twice, the drop of a hat, with both endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so that's also a danger of putting on the baby blinders. We make bigger problems out of things that may not even be a problem. They might be just normal human variation.
Yeah. And do you think it also plays with the mind of women? One of the moms who came to me said that she was diagnosed with PCOS. She did have a cyst at some point in her ovary, but her cycles were absolutely all right. Everything else was all right, but she was completely lost by this label that she had PCOS. So
yeah.
Yeah, how can we really help women understand this better and think about this from a place of...
Yeah, I think it's such a shame because when we don't understand baseline and human variability and the beauty of human variability, you think about how we have bowel movements, how we have, how we sleep, like it's all so varied. How long our pregnancies are, how our deliveries are, how our lactation is. Like, of course, our cycles and our ovaries and our uterus are going to have all this variation. And so to make it into a problem, and that is so easy to do when we don't have the baseline empowering education and we don't have people that are saying, like, I mean, in this instance, I don't obviously know her whole history, but if you have a lot of follicles on deck, a lot of eggs on deck, that's great for your fertility. And the only thing that gets in your way is if you have so many that you stop ovulating. Like, she's almost, I tell my patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome is more like being too fertile. Like, sometimes you're so fertile that it glitches out. And there is indeed a theory of polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's one theory that it maybe is a genetic variation that happens in about 10% of the population, because if there were a famine or a natural disaster and people were to starve out or be in scarcity, that people with polycystic ovarian syndrome would have the blood sugar, the insulin resistance, metabolic hormone changes would shift in them for the better. They would become more fertile and they would continue to procreate, while a lot of people would probably starve out of fertility for a while. So there's such wisdom. And I would say, if you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, yes, you have a lot of follicles, and any month that we ovulate and one of those follicles pops open and releases an egg, it should reabsorb and collapse and be reabsorbed by the body. If you do a scan of random, just women off the street, come on in if you're ovulating, a good 20% of them will have cysts that just are taking a little bit longer to absorb. You give them 2-3 extra months and they just go away. They don't throw off hormones. They don't do anything crazy. They're not going to rupture and cause a bunch of pain. They're just there. And if we don't know that, and somebody says, oh, you have a cyst on your ovary and you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm going to have a really hard time. And that just likely is not the case.
Yeah, thank you so much. That is so helpful for women to be able to see and understand. And I was going to ask you, where does acupuncture, you're also an acupuncturist, fall in all of this with respect to fertility, hormonal balances? How does that function?
And correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is there's not a lot of acupuncture in India. Is that correct?
There's not a lot of acupuncture. There's a lot of acupressure, yes.
Yeah. So I think, in my experience, acupuncture and acupressure are especially good at resetting that sort of stuck, clenchy chi and kind of bound up circulatory issues. So I can get a person unstuck in one treatment, but they can walk out the door and get restuck without the education and the context, right? So I think acupuncture is really, I mean, if we look at like a brain scan of what happens during acupuncture, the kind that I do, at least, that's very nervous system trauma informed and comfortable and relaxing. There are other kinds of acupuncture that are, fixing an injury or something that's not going to do this. But it makes the brain shut off in many areas. It goes black. And then the brain waves that stay will shift into the kind of brain waves that children and really good meditators can get into easily. And so I think it's so wonderful. Like, a lot of, I think it's so commendable to have a sitting practice and to have a meditative practice and do breath work. But also, what a joy to just be able to show up in my office and hop on, chat for a while, feel really cozy, have some tea, hop up on the table, and then I'm just going to make your brain do that. You don't have to try, you don't have to practice. And then if we do the education piece on top of it, you're going to go out and feel less threatened and have more tools and have a bigger reframe. And so I think acupuncture is like, if each point is like a thermostat, a dial, acupuncture might be like 5 degrees, and acupressure might be like 2 degrees, 3 degrees. It's just a little bit less of an input, but still can make a shift And like you can do 2 degrees more often for free. And that's beautiful. And then there are things like electrostim acupuncture and adding moxibustion or heat to the points and electricity. Or maybe like turning it up 8 degrees or turning it down 8 degrees. So there's different increments, and you'll see this reflected in the studies where they'll say, oh, there's not a lot of research that proves definitively acupressure is doing anything, or even just acupuncture compared to sham acupuncture. It's very similar a lot of times. The more you amplify what you're doing and make it very specific and more input, like adding electrostim, the more it's like, yeah, it's definitely different than not doing acupuncture. So yeah, I think it's a great tool. If I had to take education and relationships or acupuncture, I would take education and relationships every time. But I know people love getting acupuncture, and it's fantastic, and I'm very honored to get to do that piece too.
This sounds absolutely blissful and beautiful.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I can't think that I can imagine that if anybody had it once and wouldn't want to have it like more often.
I think if it's done the way that with the trauma informed lens, yeah. And one of the ways that you can tell if anyone is getting, and you can do this with other things, one of the things that changes when the nervous system and the chi and the shifts happen is time doesn't matter as much. We can look at our kids and see like they're not aware of like in an hour. And so often I'll leave a person on the table and I'll say, I'm going to be back in 35 minutes. And, 35 minutes with no phone, no screens, and then I come back in and they're kind of lightly, almost snoring or breathing so deeply. And I take off their eye pillow and I start gently talking to them. It's Nicole, I'm going to do this next. And I'm going to take off your needles. And then they'll be like, how long was that? And I'll be like, it was actually 40 minutes. And they're like, oh, it felt like 5. And it's like, that's it. We did it. You did it.
Yes. It's like the yogic nidra where you're slightly aware of your environment, but you're still deep in your subconscious. Oh, that's delicious.
It's so humbling to just see like this tool that I just get out of the way. I just like got taught by these amazing teachers and I get to do it and then step back and see that it's like I don't even have to understand it. It just gives me goosebumps. So exciting.
Yes. And Nicole, have you ever had a couple where you didn't really have to really do anything except talk them into feeling fertile again, and that worked?
I think yes, especially it's hard for me to know because most of what I do is intertwined with the treatment. So I wondered that. And then in 2020, I launched an online program that is all the ideas that I teach in my acupuncture sessions without the acupuncture. And some of the stories of the people that have done these programs, and it's like they're doing work, they're doing big work, but it's all reframes and choice and life. My practice is called LifeHealingLife because it's like, it's not Nicole Lange acupuncturist. It's not let me fix your fertility, Nicole.com. It's just like, here, let me give you the framework that's been passed down that is intuitive and beautiful, and you can sit with it how you want. So one couple comes to mind where they had done multiple IVFs and finally conceived and had a stillbirth and didn't know that they could keep going. And so they stumbled on my online program and she started doing it, and she was doing the foundations module. I always start with the foundation and talking about safety and clarity and where you do have control and where you don't, and grief. And she started having him. She went back and they started watching it as a date, and they would have these dates. And she was writing me. I never met her. I've never met her to this day. She'd write me, we're doing these dates, and then we go for walks and we talk about it and we're processing. And and at one point she wrote me and she said, we went to a restaurant, and for the first time we looked around and we were like, we're feeling like peace and joy and like different, just like something shifting. And she did the whole program and was very interactive on emails. And then she was like, we have embryos frozen still. I think I'm going to get ready to do an embryo transfer. I think I can do it. And then she wrote me and she said, Nicole, I didn't get to the embryo transfer. I'm pregnant. And it had been all this time to get to the first IVFs and then failed IVFs. And then, and so she had her second child and healthy and thriving and just from this different place. And then a couple of years later, she's like, I think, okay, now I'm going to do it. We're going to try for baby number 3. And she got pregnant again. And it was just like, it's so amazing to me. Like, I know why I'm doing it. I know what I'm doing. But just to then see it, it's like, gosh, people are amazing. People are amazing. And it's so good to know that in this moment of humanity and history too.
Goosebumps. So many goosebumps.
I feel so lucky. It just keeps me so much more centered than I think any other thing that I could possibly do.
Touch wood. It's like a switch just got on. I mean, like they didn't know where it lied, and you showed them where it was, and they just switched it on, and then on their newer journey.
And it's funny you use the word switch, because I'm thinking of another person who said she was about to do her embryo transfer, and she said, I just feel like there's a switch that has to be turned on for me to be open to this embryo, and I can't do it. And I just said, I think more than a switch turning on, it's radical acceptance of where you're at. Like, these people it wasn't just like a switch turned, it was enough conditions, enough conversations, enough time, enough processing, enough new ideas, enough shifts, small and cumulative, had happened where that switch flipping made sense. And this person was in a really different place and had a really different path and was, doing a shortcut. A lot of people come to me and are like, I'm doing IVF next month, go. And I'm honored to do that work. And so she was more that. And I said, I think more than thinking that you're going to get in a month to this magical switch, I would like you to see that the switch isn't on because of how hard it is to sit in limbo, how hard it is to let go of control in a world that we do control a lot. We do have a lot of choice, and hard work does pay off in most things and not this. And just give yourself permission to not have that switch on and to know that you can still get pregnant, because if we go back to the bank account, it takes a tremendous amount of chi and energy and yin and yang to try to force something that your conditions just don't align with. And it's so threatening to look at it and know that it's not happening and want it to happen and feel like it has to happen and feel like there's this timeline, right? This is so bad for a bank account, for a body's bank account. And so I was like, what if we just said your light switches and you can still get pregnant, and like radical acceptance and honoring your experience and your conditions is the best thing for you to welcome this embryo. And she got pregnant and she had a healthy pregnancy. So it's about just being the healthiest version. And it's like I said at the start, some people go on vacation with, their backpack and $10, and some people it's just like, just get out of the way and try to move them towards more instead of less.
Yeah. And where does nutrition then lie in all of this with health?
Yeah, I think I was probably 2 years into my 3-year program. I was eating lunch. And I was like, we literally, molecularly, are made out of the atoms of the food that we're eating. Like, that's true. Like, we are what we eat. There was a study in the 50s where they actually tracked it, and like, I think it was like 96% of our molecules in a year turnover from oxygen, hydration, and food we eat. That's wild. So of course it matters. Of course, eating real foods and whole foods and seasonally and joyfully and in community and all of this is really important. But also moderation and splurging sometimes, and knowing that you're not undoing everything in one fell swoop with, a little candy or a little glass of wine or whatever your splurge is. If it's moderate and it's joyful and it's in community, I think there's a place for that. The other big piece of nutrition is, are your systems able to assimilate, right? So if you're asthmatic and you're trying to do all this breath work and you have all this inflammation and phlegm and constriction, that just doesn't, I say it's like you go to work every day and you're like, I'm depositing money in my account. And then your lungs or your gut can do the same thing, a very inflamed, permeable gut that's got a lot of damage or a lot of genetic predisposition to imbalance. It's like you have a crooked accountant and it's like, here, I'm giving you this money, put it in my account. And it's like, I'll put half and the other half I'm just going to burn. That's really unfair too, but that's how some bodies are. So then we work with that. It's like, okay, can we kick out the crooked accountant? Can we work on that inflammation? Can we work on the gut permeability or the dysbiosis in the microbiome or things like that? And maybe we get to a point where the crooked accountant's only burning 20%. Perfection is not the goal, but we want to put more in the account and feel less frustrated.
Love how your approach is very balanced, and whenever you speak about all the aspects of the situation, and that helps somebody understand that there is nuance to this and there's nuance to everything, and it's not one thing that might just fit you. It may be an amalgamation of so many other things. And yeah, that brings me to my last question, and building up to that, what's your take on seed cycling? So what I was hinting at is everybody sometimes thinks about, okay, this will fix me, or this, for example, we have a lot of herbs, Ayurvedic herbs, really available. This would heal me, ashwagandha will heal me, or that will heal me, that will bring me fertility. So yeah.
I mean, I think your lead-in was perfect. It's nuanced, right? Like technically there's some great tradition and history and modern research on these things, right? But I think it's kind of, you cannot use them with the baby blinders on thinking, I'm going to use a herb or a supplement or a specific diet tweak or a specific belief. And that is going to, I can fix my 25% and then the baby happens. It's clenchy, it's taxing, it's not realistic. And so seed cycling in the place of like, it makes me mindful and choiceful, and I enjoy these foods, and it allows me to put some of my energy that I could be on TikTok comparing my numbers on my blood work to somebody else. Like, seed cycling is way better in that way. But if it's clenchy and if it's prescriptive and if it's something that you don't like, I think herbs are such a great example. Like I was so blessed. I got to help my herbal teacher, my main herbal teacher, Yongping, write his book about herbal formulas. And I got paid work study money to do it, to assist him through school. I got out of school and I was like, everyone's going to get herbs. They're going to be customized. I'm going to do the parts of their cycle. I'm going to, seed cycling, but with herbs. And I would, tweak, and it's raw herbs. You have to go home and soak them and cook them and do it. They taste bad. Your house smells. And I was just so excited. I was like, of course everyone would want to do this. I'm a baby acupuncturist. Of course I love this. And then my patients were like, yeah, I don't need a refill. I'm good still. I'm like, you should be done with your herbs. No, I've got plenty. And I just had to have this moment in my practice where I was like, oh, this is about me and what I think is cool for trying to fix their liver qi stagnation or whatever pattern I was working on from a Chinese medicine perspective, their bank account. And if that's not the way they want to work on it, or that doesn't align with their preferences, their finances, their interest, their taste buds, then there's so many other ways that I could do this. Why would I do it in a way that's kind of clenchy and baby blinders just because I think it's cool? So fast forward 20 years into my practice, I almost exclusively only prescribe tea pill versions of pills, if at all. They're very sparse and they're very rarely cyclical, because I don't want people to have to think about, oh my gosh, did I ovulate or not? Nicole wants me to change my herbs. It's like, this is your main pattern. Here's the bottle. Take them if you want them. Say no if you don't. We can do this a billion ways.
Love that. Love that there's a whole world out there which you can access, and it's not just one way. And yeah, not taking away from the fact that some people might just take a herb and might fix their problems, but not possible for many others.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that's good work if you can get it.
Yeah. Easy peasy. Love it. But then don't go about and keep prescribing it to everybody like it's...
Yes. It worked for me. I now have an entire YouTube channel all about it. It's like, well, and this, what are the chances that, you think about all of our different bank accounts, think about all our different chakras, all our different Chinese medicine patterns. It's like, it could be the best thing in the world for that particular person's pattern, and it could be the worst thing for somebody else's pattern. So you see, like, chasteberries, great example. Some people swear by it, and other people take it and they stop menstruating for 3 months, and it's just like, that's the danger of not actually being nuanced about it and knowing your body. So, yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening to this episode and is embarking on the journey of conception, and they want to have a baby and they want to know all about it? So how would you guide them? Like, where should they begin?
Yeah. I think keeping front of mind the idea that, like, true fertility comes from the 75%. And, like, you may have to troubleshoot infertility if you're one of the people that has an anatomical or a reductionist issue. And you do want to, after a certain amount of time based on your age, check that off. But start from a place of, how do I cultivate safety? How do I cultivate listening to my body, becoming educated, trusting nuance is okay, trusting that I'm not infertile? Come from a place where, and if you do that, and then you're in that headspace and you need to go in and work on that nursery, you're going to keep that in the context of a healthier foundation house neighborhood, and it'll show up faster and better and be easier to tolerate if that's what it comes to. And a lot of times it doesn't. So take it one step at a time.
Love that. Thank you so much, Nicole, for giving us your time and
Thank
for all
you.
these. Yeah.
I love your show. This is such a joy, and I love that we can connect across the world, and it's a total honor.
It's always lovely, energetic, and you're hilarious. You bring it.
I think comedy is great.
Yes, it is. It connects and it's joyous, and I've had a wonderful time with you, and I hope to connect with you sometime later too on another important topic on and other aspects of reproductive health. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the power. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.
Starting a podcast with poor recording tools in the market? It was painful until I found Zencastr. Its high-quality audio and video recording, along with the option of a backup, makes it super sturdy and a savior at times. With an easy-to-use dashboard and super convenient tools for advertising campaigns such as reels and videos, Zencastr is my comfort choice. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code BIRTHAGNI, BIRTHAGNI, and you will get 30% off of your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. You may also explore their free hobbyist plan to begin with.